Hey guys, it's Pastor Tim. I want to take a few minutes and go back into our study in Titus chapter 2 to uncover and think about what God is going to be doing in our lives in 2021. Paul says to Titus, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions." The grace of God appearing is the person and the work of Jesus Christ. He is bringing salvation, and that is the idea of rescue. Our Redeemer has rescued us, delivered us from the judgment of God, and delivered us from our own self-destruction. And He is training us. We talked briefly about what training means. It is Jesus reclaiming us for His own, as Paul says, conforming us to the image of Christ. And so the person who redeemed you is not content to leave you as you are. He is going to reclaim you inside and out for Himself. Today we're going to consider what Jesus is actually training us in. Paul says first, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions. Now I want you to think about some of these words that are in the text. First of all, what is ungodliness? Summary of it is that ungodliness is life without God. It is literally godlessness, or what you and I would call secularism. Now, it's not possible to not have a deity, to not have something or someone that you're worshiping. This is why Paul says in Romans chapter 1 that the wrath of God has been revealed against all ungodliness, and then he defines that as people who worship the creature rather than the Creator who is blessed forever. Notice the apostle doesn't say those who have stopped worshiping the Creator, period. No, he says those who have stopped worshiping the Creator and have chosen instead to worship the creature. It's impossible for us not to worship something, but the denial of the living God is called godlessness, or in this passage, ungodliness. It is life apart from God. It is life outside of the truth of God, outside of a relationship with the living God, outside of any accountability or any inclusion of God in societal life. It is atheism, if you will, or it is an attempt to push God out of the common community, out of the social structures of our world. And certainly we see that, but there's more subtle ways. We talk about writing our own story. And I said Sunday, we don't write our story. We don't have a pen that is able to write that story, and even if we tried to, God erases that story and writes the story for us that He has chosen to write. In short, ungodliness is the opposite of virtue. It is the opposite of biblical ethics. Paul then says that we're being trained not only to renounce ungodliness, but also worldly passions. Now, passions are not bad. This word is used often in relation to temptation. James chapter 1, James says that we are led away to temptation by our own internal desires. And then he says in James chapter 4 that the quarrels we're actually having come from our internal desires. And in both of these texts, the word desire really references lust or lustful desires or inappropriate desires. But the word desires is not bad. Jesus in Luke says that He has long desired to eat this meal with His disciples, speaking of the Passover meal and of the communion meal that He instituted. So desires aren't wrong, but notice how the apostle qualifies them. They are worldly desires. They are the desires of a world that is living outside and unaccountable to God. Desires could be simply stated as anything we desire or long for that is outside of what God has provided for us. At its root, it's covetousness. It's wanting what you don't have, or wanting what God says is only permissible in a certain context. These are worldly desires. The world throws off any restraint and says, I want to be happy, so I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to fulfill my desires. And they believe that that's what's going to give them joy and satisfaction in life. Now, how does Paul say Jesus is training us? He is training us to renounce these things, literally to deny them, to disavow them, to turn our backs on them, to say no to them. And so in 2021, I promise you that if you are a child of God, that Jesus is reclaiming you by training you to renounce ungodliness and worldly desires. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.